揽投资国内专业的互联网理财平台，收益超银行活期数倍，已为众多用户带来丰厚收益。揽投资理财新选择，
源于民族之心，兴于品质之巅，成于健康之路，有爱有缘有三元。
今秋9月，中国国家主席习近平将对美国进行国事访问，这是习近平主席任内第一次对美国进行国事访问，也被认为是中美关系关键时期的一次关键访问。国际社会呢对此报以高度关注，纷纷希望习近平主席和奥巴马总统可以秉承2013年加州中原会晤、2014年北京瀛台夜话的精神，继续巩固中美关系未来发展的大方向。而在习近平主席访美前夕，美国前国务卿基辛格、澳大利亚前总理陆克文、纽约市前市长布隆伯格、美国驻华大使鲍卡斯以及《经济学人》杂志社总编辑贝多斯等等，都分别做客财经时间，表达了对习近平主席访美的期待，同时呢，也表达了对于中美构建新型大国关系的见解。
今年3月，美国前国务卿基辛格访华，并拜会了中国国家主席习近平。作为中国老朋友的基辛格，因其出任尼克松时期国家安全顾问秘密访华，开启中美关系新篇章而为国人熟知。即便退出公职后，基辛格对重大外交政策议题的看法仍广受关注。在他这次中国之行中，接受了财新传媒总编辑胡舒立和主编王朔的联合采访。在谈及习近平将对美国的首次国事访问时，基辛格表示，习近平的到访也恰逢美国为明年总统大选预热的时间。但中美关系发展的事实证明，美国的对华政策会得到传承。他相信未来的新政府也会继续支持发展对华关系。而习近平对美国的访问也提供给美国非常好的机会，来倾听中国最高领导人的声音，听其关于世界局势和国内改革以及发展的解释。
What kind of expectation do you predict about his next visit to United States?
Well, this will be the first state visit of President Xi to the United States. And he's coming in a period when the United States is preparing for an election next year. So it contributes enormously to the continuity of Chinese-American relations, to see that the foreign policy that has already existed for a number of, I think, 9 presidential terms, is now being carried on towards the end of the current administration, and I'm sure will be supported in the new administration. Also, Americans have not really had an opportunity to hear an explanation from the top Chinese leader about the reform program and development of the country. And I'm very confident that President Xi, when he comes to the United States, will present a picture of what is going on in China that will be very significant.
You know all the Chinese leaders since Mao. What's your impression about President Xi, and how do you assess his foreign policy against the evolution of China's strategic change?
President Xi has undertaken an enormous task. He is attempting and succeeding in transforming a nation of over 1 billion people and to change patterns that have been established for many generations, and to do this at a time when there is also a change of population from the countryside to the cities, and when the world economy is becoming more complex. So I think that President Xi will be recorded in history as a leader who's brought about very major changes, some of the most dramatic changes in Chinese history.
And what is the trajectory of China's rise? It has happened for more than 2 decades. Is it a linear process or a process filled with ups and downs?
Historically, a rise has always had some ups and downs. China, when I remember China in 1971, and if anyone had shown me a picture of what Beijing looks like and said in 25 years Beijing will look like this, I would have said that's absolutely impossible. But up to now, the rise of China has been, to all purposes, uninterrupted. That has never happened before for such a long period of time. So it is possible that there are some down periods. But when one looks at the evolution of China in the last 30 to 40 years, I think the long-term trend will be upward, and especially this will be so if the reforms that are now being undertaken are carried through.
I just finished reading it. It's very good, excellent. And in this book, you said that the United States and China should learn hard lessons from the First World War. So in your mind, what are the lessons to be learned?
The lessons are that countries can drift into a conflict by doing things that look perfectly reasonable on a day-to-day basis, and then suddenly find themselves in a position where they don't know anymore how to extricate themselves. I believe that none of the leaders who started the First World War would have done so had they known what the end would look like. And so I think that China and the United States have to be careful not to get into situations where even when they act reasonably, they create a tension that over a period of time will be difficult to manage.
Both countries should avoid losing the flexibility and change the situation into a more rigid situation.
Both should remember that whatever their differences, their common interests are greater. And so that when issues arise, they should be dealt with by compromise and without pressure. And that they should be settled on the basis of remembering that the need for peace is greater than the immediate tension.
Yeah. Also in your book, you said that, quote, concepts of partnership need to become paradoxically elements of the modern balance of power, unquote. So why this paradox is necessary, and what both countries' leaders must do to manage this paradox successfully?
It's understandable that China wants to keep foreigners from approaching its borders, and that it therefore undertakes a defense effort to that end. And one can particularly understand it in the light of China's history. It's also understandable that the United States does not want any region dominated by a superpower. This creates a certain balance. On the other hand, the two elements in that balance, namely China and the United States, also have the need for cooperation, as has been shown in the agreement on climate control, and as I'm sure on President Xi's forthcoming visit to the United States will lead to other positive understandings. So both of these tendencies have to go on side by side.
You contributed to China's entry into the international system more than 40 years ago. And today, China Besides seeking larger influence in this existing international system, China also started to create a new multilateral financial institutions and economic institutions parallel to the World Bank and IMF. So what are the strategic implications of this new approach?
It isn't clear yet, and there's a dialogue still going on between the United States and other countries and China. Some people in the United States interpret it as an attempt to create an alternative financial system to the existing financial system, and maybe ultimately to replace it. I say let history decide. There is a need for development, and there's a need for capital for development. So there must be a way of dividing the responsibilities of these institutions. We will see what happens later. I don't think any country can create an international system by itself.
对于习近平主席即将展开的美国之行，不久前访华的彭博有限合伙企业创始人、联合国城市与气候变化问题特使、前纽约市市长迈克尔·布隆伯格也在接受财新时间访问时表达了他的期待。
President Xi Jinping is going to visit the United States next month, and that is his first state visit, and he will be in New York as well after Washington, D.C. So what is expectation in United States about this visit?
I think if you walk down the street, a lot wouldn't know who President Xi is. They wouldn't know who President Hollande of France is. They wouldn't know who Chancellor Merkel is. They don't even know who the President of the United States is. So you got to be careful. But I think they'd all say, I hope that they come to an agreement in Paris, and that the visits at the United Nations Week will be helpful. And you got to remember that China is the United States' second biggest trading partner. Canada first, and I think China second. And I think the United States is China's biggest trading partner. So we have an enormous amount of business. There's an enormous number of Chinese working, mostly the big cities like New York. But I mean, if you stand in the food court at 731 Lexington, speaking Mandarin would be very helpful if you want to talk to an awful lot of people.
Any suggestion in terms of activities President Xi can do in order for it to become a success, like the one Deng Xiaoping did?
That's been done. I would not suggest to President Xi a cowboy hat. I think there's some symbolism, and there's some things that he could do, and I've talked to the embassy with some ideas, which I'm not going to share with you. Whether they'll do them or not, I don't know. It would be good advice for him. You'd like to have people like you, warm, fuzzy, we would say.